Hello, everyone. I am Erica with Save on Designs, and this is going to be a shrouded cross tutorial. And I wanted to kind of do a little bit of intro. So I haven't been on camera before, so hello to everybody. But I wanted to talk about this design just a little bit before we got started with the process. This is probably my favorite design that I've ever made. Definitely one that I'm most proud of. Obviously, a shrouded cross was not my idea. There's a lot of imagery around that going on this time of year, close to Easter. But I really wanted to create this in the way that I work with right now is with wood. So why I love this project, obviously, the story behind it, but also this is a lot of juxtaposition with this. And juxtaposition is just simply the idea of two things coming together that are in contrast of one another, that have a contrasting effect. So for this, we see it's simple as far as, let me get a smaller one, as far as there's just two wood colors with this. But I've had people tell me it's kind of intimidating and they wanted the tutorial because of that. And I thought, well, okay, why would this be intimidating? But I do think there's a geometric piece to it. There's some lines going on. There's a lot to look at, and maybe a few challenges as far as how we put it together compared to some of the other ornaments. Also, as far as the juxtaposition piece, what you see, you've got a lot of geometric lines here with the cross. And then you've got that swoopy shrouded effect. So there's that juxtaposition there. And then if you think about if you were to see this in person, you'd have that hardwood cross and then the soft material. So we just have a lot going on there. And to carry that motif into the actual story too, you've got the death followed by life. So the whole thing is can kind of be a little deep. So that's my little art critique. But I wanted to talk about wood choices a little bit. And for me, I rely on two things with the wood grain designs. So one is the grain, and one is the color variation within that grain, within that wood. So the grain is going to create direction and depth. Where is it pulling your eyes? It's going to make that things that you might just see as a color now have a direction. And then the color variances also can help you understand what your mind is seeing, because in general, wood is brown. There's a lot of undertones and things maybe we'll talk about in a different video down the road, but for the most part, it's brown. We're not seeing a lot of color in there. So having that variance can kind of trick your brain a little bit into seeing, I'll say things that aren't there, but kind of. So that's the art of it. So let's talk about wood a little bit. First of all, when I'm picking wood, I've got some samples here that I kind of wanted to show when I'm looking for that wood grain. So in these, this is the one that I had up. So this is a sapele with cherry. Sapele tends to have that really strong grain. Cherry can sometimes, and other times not so much. You can see it a little bit here, but it's not as strong. So for the shroud, we want to have that grain, but it could be not as obvious with the grain, but we really want to get a good grain here. And I'm going to show you a sample of one that maybe doesn't have that as much. This one is made with alder and poplar. And if you can kind of see there's some grain in there, but it's not strong. It's not going to be that strong, defined line like this one is. Doesn't make this one wrong, but to me, this one pops a little more. You really see that design come out a little bit better. The shroud, again, doesn't always have to have that as much. That poplar doesn't have as much gray, but you can still kind of see it. So this one maybe is a little more about the color variations, and you might like that too. But let's take a look at some woods here. So here I have a maple. It's got some really gorgeous grain in there, but this isn't going to show up when we're looking at something like the cross. It's got these big wide grains in there. It's not going to give us the effect we want. I did not choose. Plus it's really light, and I don't think we'd want that for that wood backing on the cross. But that is the main reason why I wouldn't choose this one. Now the shroud, possibly, this one is one I did in actually some hardwoods, and that's a curly maple, so it's a little bit different, has a little more grain in it. And it doesn't look too bad. So you might want to choose maple for that if you wanted that more white coloring. And the next one I have is an oak. Oak always kind of surprises me. I didn't use it a whole lot because I started more with jewelry, and oak kind of has a lot of texture for smaller jewelry. You don't want to see all that mess over there. Let's go this way. So I've not used it as much, but every time I do use it, I really like it. So I think I need to use it a little more. And I did have something, I believe, that had oak on it. And I was kind of pleasantly surprised with how that came out, even for that lighter, like we just mentioned with the maple, we might not want that lighter color on the back, but this one kind of worked. And I think it's because those grains are so strong, and so they're pointing you in that direction and making that your eye pull to that cross, and it just works. But when we are looking at the grain in oak, it's almost got two grains, because can you kind of see all this ripply going on? But if you get really close to it, and I don't know if you can see that really well, it's also got a really straight grain going across as well. So it has actually worked really, really well for me for some of the furs on some of the ornaments, like the animal fur. This can give that texture really well. And then I have a cherry. And this is a really good example. This one can go both ways. You can see here, this one has a really wide open grain, so it's not tight at all. But I flip it over, and then we can see all those great lines showing up. Cherry will have these little blips of dark in it, which sometimes can add some cool texture to what you're making. And this side has, and I don't know how much you can tell in here, a lot of pink undertone, or this one has more of a lighter tan color. I don't know that I see that change that much once I finish cherry, but we'll see in some other woods how different pieces can really bring out different colors, where you can even use both of them in the same one. And this is a great example of that. So this is a hickory. Some pieces of hickory I get are this really, really light, almost white. You will see some of those little dark grains come out when you finish it. I used hickory for the little snowmen, if you had seen those ornaments. And they worked really well because they gave your mind that appearance of white, but still gave that rustic feel of the wood that I don't think maple would have had that same effect. But here we can see all those variances. If I flip it over, this one has even more. So there's a lot of projects that I may have cut some parts of it from a lighter piece of the hickory and then from the darker piece of the hickory and used them together. And they give that contrast enough to be like two different woods. And again, we can see that with, this is a piece of sapele. And this is a pretty dark piece of sapele. And we flip it over, and here's a very light piece. So we can, I don't know how much you guys can tell there. We can see that light and dark contrast as well. Again, I've used both of that. I've done that with mahogany as well, where you have a lighter piece and a darker piece, and we can mix those up and use them with each other. Here is walnut. I love walnut. It is just such a great base for everything. If you want to represent something darker or black noses on the dogs, things like that, or in the eyes, walnut does a really great job of that. It's got a lot of variance in here. So this piece, I would maybe use this on a cross. You're going to have a lot of variance. You're going to get those lines. This side, on the other hand, very open grain. It's not running really straight. I probably wouldn't use this side on a cross. And I do have this one. I love, this is walnut and hickory together. I think those undertones in the hickory really pop, and they're very much that walnut color, and they go really well together. For the crosses that I've done, I've had some people order some that I am making, and everybody is loving the sapele with the cedar on the shroud. So that's actually what we're going to make today. I'm using these two woods. And oh, speaking of cedar, that's the last one I wanted to show you. These are all from Smoky Hill. As far as plywoods go, I've tried a couple other suppliers. I like Smoky Hill the best. Some suppliers do have some other woods. That poplar and alder cross that I showed you earlier came from another supplier. It's a little thinner, so I can't really use them together with the Smoky Hill wood. I am looking, I've done some hardwoods, a couple. Oh, I showed you the curly maple one earlier. So want to play around with a few more hardwoods here and there, just to bring some other color and texture into some of my projects. But we can see on the cedar, you've got kind of this bit up here that's got a lot more brown in it. We've got, look at all this white striping. That looks really amazing. I mean, you can see on this cross, like all of that little white, lighter color striping in there. Avoid the knots. Those aren't going to look good. But sometimes, if any of you have seen the cardinal ornament that I made, I got a really great piece of cedar, and I got really close to a knot, and it was a lot darker there because you can kind of see around these knots it gets a little darker. So sometimes you can work that around what you want to do. In some pieces you see that swoop, and for some things you don't always want a really tight straight wood grain. You can do a little more of that swoop, especially where color is more important than the grain for whatever you're making. So I'm going to stop filming and get set up with the overhead so we can put this cross together and talk about some of those tips and tricks for this project. All right, so here we are on the assembly of the shrouded cross. This is the 7.5 inch, I forget how big it is, the smaller one, and it is the one that has a base. So we're going to talk about, let's talk about the base first. I have everything cut and I have everything put on here. So I've done a dry fit, make sure I have all the pieces. I didn't drop one of these tiny little pieces in the bottom of my laser and don't realize I don't have it. I have everything together. I like how it looks. All my pieces go well. I don't have that one oddball piece that I cut out of a scrap that doesn't match the rest, all that kind of stuff. So we're going to talk about the base first. And if you have cut this file, I did have a couple questions. I talk about it in my file description on Etsy. But I have this little jig, and I've had a couple people message me saying, what do I do with this jig? So the jig is for the base to help put it together. And you cut it out of whatever you're using for your backer base on your cross. So for this one, I have 1/8 MDF. So I cut my jig out of that. And what I'm going to do is just, very simply, I'm going to use this when I glue to line all my pieces up, because I know this is the same depth as my base here. And if everything is all lined up, I know that'll fit in well. I will show you a couple little tips and tricks I have if I do mess this up. But we're going to go ahead and get started first on gluing the base because that's going to be the quickest and easiest. I'm going to flip these two pieces over because those are the side I want to put my glue on. One thing I did want to mention with the base, if you can see this part of the base, let me get back in the frame a little. This part of the base is bigger than this side, so you do want to line these up. All three pieces are like that, and that is on purpose. When I was designing this, there's some physics teacher in the back of my brain that said, hey, you're putting something in here, but it's got some weight on the front of it too. Probably not such a big deal on the smaller cross, and maybe not even the medium cross, but the large one, which is quite tall, that you do with the 1/4 inch MDF, this really could become an issue. There's 4 layers on that base, but that weight and the center of gravity for the piece could be thrown off. So when you put your final piece in here, and here's a small one that is made with 1/4 MDF, and you can maybe see that area a little more, that this side is bigger. I'm going to put the back of the cross to the smaller side. And in that case, now it actually sits, I don't think I'm going to be able to show that exactly, but it does sit directly in the middle for the whole entire width of the cross. So just be sure you're putting those on the correct way and not getting one this way, because that's going to obviously not look right. So I am using Type Bond multi-surface glue. There's a lot of glues you can use. My recommendation for this is always nothing that dries too fast, and really not anything that dries too slow either. Yeah, right. So I'm just going to smear some glue around. You want to be careful with this one because you really don't want the glue to ooze out. It's going to be a little harder to clean up. And I'll just actually glue both sides of these. Add that little bit of glue there. Use my jig. I'm going to set that right in there. Then I can just drop this right over the top of it for both of those pieces. Make sure my wide side is going the correct way. Now I'm probably going to want to clamp this one. Clamping can be a little tough, for me anyway, because I feel like these things move when I clamp. So you have to be really careful. We'll see this more with the cross, but I'm just going to carefully put that on there, making sure that nothing wiggled this way or that way. I think that looks good. My piece will slide right through. So I know all those are lined up nice and neat in there. Now, if I get to the end and realize maybe some glue has leaked out and one piece has moved over a little bit, I have these really fun little sanding sticks that I got off of Amazon. They come in a huge bundle, all kinds of different grits. But those have worked really well for some of these smaller wood pieces because I can kind of slide them in there and sand some stuff down, or sand on the space a little bit to get those evened up so that things will fit. So I have made that mistake a couple times and found that as a workaround. And that's when I thought, you know, why don't I just make a jig that will go in here and will sit the same, in the exact same place that my base will. So I'm going to set this aside so it can dry a little bit more, and let's get started on the cross. So when I am gluing, we're going to first do a little tablecloth trick maybe. It's not going well. All right, slide all those pieces off. I always use a scrap piece of wood and have some of my glue ready to go in case I need to smear it on the back of a piece a little bit where I don't have enough glue. This is small enough. I'm probably going to do all my pieces. Actually, I'm going to start with this little middle section of the cross. And then I'm just going to put these together like a puzzle. The cross can be a little challenging. You have all these open edges. I just did the sunflower tutorial, and that was very compact. All the pieces sort of squashed in together, and that made it a lot easier to go together. These are going to slide really easy. So don't spend a lot of time trying to get them in just the perfect spot. And let's see, I've already messed up my little bit here. My order of how everything goes in there. So there are my first few pieces. Now I've already got a little glue oozing out over here. I am not nearly so concerned about glue oozing out the sides as I am about it oozing up in between. And that is because it's harder to get out. It's going to be seen. Even though it does dry clear, it will probably show a little bit if it comes up through the cracks. So we don't want that. Here's an example of I did not get enough glue on that piece. So I have toothpicks, cheap, easy. Get into small spots. I use these for everything. I always have a little jar full of them in my work desk here. And then I can slide those on. This is probably, and that's why I just did this piece so I could talk about it for a second, this middle section. This is probably the easiest to mess up. That's really going to hurt your finished piece. I talked earlier about just that geometric piece of it, and if these aren't lined up perfectly, that little star that's created in the middle, your eye's going to be drawn to it because it's not going to be right, and it's going to look weird, and it's just going to stand out and take away from the whole piece. So this is probably one of your most important parts about putting this together. Now I mentioned I don't mind the glue oozing out the side as much. I usually like to let that dry just a little bit because it kind of balls right up and comes off. And then that will dry clear. You might get a little, if you do miss this, it will take like an X-Acto knife or something later on to get it off once it dries. But that does not look too bad. My trick with these, when I'm lining things up, I'm going to look from the front to make sure. So I'm looking down from the top to see if I can see that back piece coming through anywhere, and then I can flip it over. Ooh, that looks terrible. I didn't have my risers in when I cut this. And make sure that nothing is showing here, so I know I'm lined up on both sides. So let's go ahead and add the rest of our pieces here. And again, I'm just going to try to hit all these edges. I don't want, glue's tough. I don't want too much. I don't want too little. So that's why this is helpful. So I'd rather add a little more than have to try to take away. But yeah, these little tiny pieces there, we want to be sure we get enough on these edges. Actually, I'm going to use this. I can kind of show you this little part right here. You know, we want to be sure we have enough on these lines that everything's going to be held together nicely. And then we're just doing a puzzle. And you know what, I'm going to kind of purposely do this so I can show you, well, maybe. If you get a little too much glue and do have it come up in between, so that's really, really obvious there. If you can see that glue kind of oozing up, we don't want to have that. So I pull it apart, grab a clean toothpick, get it out of there. I usually try to put it on my palm and not on my fingers, or if you're probably a normal person and have a little towel or napkin next to you, you can wipe it on. You don't want to get it on your fingers. And that is just because you're going to touch the top part of this. If that glue oozes into the top, it's really hard to get sanded off. I was working on those cross frames the other day and actually had to throw one entirely away because I put it on upside down, realized it immediately, flipped it over and got as much glue off as I could, and I sanded and sanded and sanded, and I could still see that all these little marks of glue on there, and had to start over. Whoop. So these I'm going to try to line up on a lot of other wood grain pieces. I just want to get them on and then I can wiggle them around more. These are going to be pretty obvious that you're going to get them on the edge. So let's go ahead and try to line those up the best we can to start with. And this glue is drying really fast. I may want to add some more on some of these pieces. But it dries on the top a little bit, and when you push down on it, it'll kind of ooze out and still hold really well. And here you can see that's already dried up pretty good. Probably not enough to hold that securely. So I'm going to be sure I'm on the right side and just kind of hit this piece with a little bit of glue. Now, one of the things that I've noticed, sometimes I don't need clamping. Most of the time, a lot of ornaments I don't, because those pieces are small. When you get these long, skinny pieces is where I see the most tendency for that wood to warp, especially the bigger ones. This one might not so much, but we're still going to talk about it and clamp it down so I can show you what I do there. That's still got a nice little glob of glue, so I think we're good there. Twisting, here's another little tool I like. This is just a weeding tool, but sometimes a toothpick might help you do this too, where I just need to kind of maneuver that little corner of something around, and that's super helpful. I want to get the pieces on the right direction. Everything in the file should fit together really well. I do have people ask me about kerf and should they add it? Do I add it? I do not add it. I don't know everybody's machines, how it cuts, what materials you're using. So I do not add kerf. There's some pieces I think I could, some pieces I couldn't get together any tighter if I tried. This one I did get a little too tight. You do have a little bit of time for this glue. And that's why I usually like to glue everything at one time rather than do one section or another section, because it doesn't always fit together the way I think it should. I'm sorry, I probably got out of frame a little bit there. That one definitely doesn't have enough glue on it. So yeah, when I'm doing these, I do try to work a little quicker than I am doing now. And I also live in a really, really dry climate, so maybe your glue won't dry as fast. I don't know. I'm just going to smear a little more of that in there. Sometimes you can dip an end just to get it right in the right spot. Oh, and there I got too much glue going up the side. All right. Now I'm just going to wiggle everything around, make sure things are where I want them. I've got a little bit of that backer showing there, so I want to move those up. And now I'm checking for any warping. And I have a really great example. I don't know if you guys can see this. This little bit is sticking out. Try to look at my screen and see if you guys can see that. So I'm going to want to clamp this down. But what happens when I clamp this side, when you have these long, skinnier pieces, the other side's going to pop right up. Which just then you end up with 20 gazillion clamps all over. And that can get a little messy. Like I said, these bigger pieces, this one's pretty small, but the bigger crosses will definitely have longer pieces, and you're going to see this a lot more than you would with the like smaller, more rounded ornaments and smaller pieces. So my trick for this is I always keep a bunch of scrap. You know, I have a piece that doesn't cut very well, long, skinny, I'll hold on to it. And now I can put a clamp on both ends, and it's going to hold all those pieces down. I'm also going to watch and make sure nothing moves, because you clamp it down and something's moved and you don't see it. And it's going to dry all wrong. And specifically what I would be concerned about are maybe these little pieces down here that will be more likely to move when I do that clamping. And actually, I'm going to kind of watch through that hole. That was a little lucky. So these are just little clamps I got off of Amazon at one point in time. I have some bigger ones. Oh, can you see how that's pulled apart? Right there? Probably not. But there's a nice little hole between my two pieces. So we're definitely going to clamp that down. I have some glue oozing up a little bit, but again, that's okay. I'm going to check this side. I'm not seeing anything really pop up, but I am going to clamp that down anyway on the shroud just to be sure. I'm going to check my ends of my cross, make sure nothing's coming up there. And just clamp those. This does not have to stay on a really long time. Well, for the bigger pieces it might. I shouldn't say that. For this, I'm not as concerned. It's gonna get a good hold on that. But when you have those bigger pieces of wood that have more weight to them to pull it up, you might want to keep that on for an hour or so. And maybe taking them off to double check. Really quick, nothing moved around. So that's good. This glue does dry fairly fast at this point, especially once it gets that pressure on it. But we're going to let that sit for a little while. And I don't think I'm going to do all my sanding and finishing steps with this. I'm trying to see if I had one already put together that I could just talk about it for a second, but I don't. I'll tell you what I do with them. Is I do usually 180 grit sandpaper first and kind of go over, get all those laser schmutzy marks off. One thing, we did one that went on a base, but if you're doing anything where you have any of your backer showing, be sure you sand that before you glue anything on, because it's really hard to get the sander in there once there's another piece on top of it. So anything that's going to show, make sure that looks good before you glue. I do that sand, get all those little scorch marks off of there. I like my edges to feel just a little rounded and soft. I have a fun little blower tool that I think I took back out into the garage. It just blows air, kind of like a compressed air, but it's rechargeable. It doesn't have the chemical in it. And it's like a little mini air compressor type thing. And that blows all the dust off of it because you don't want to spray anything or put a finish on anything that has dust. You can go over it again with maybe a 220 sandpaper. Cedar, I might start with a 220 Cedar's kind of soft and not as rough, and all those scratch marks are going to show on cedar if you use too rough of a sandpaper. So I might even start with the 220 at this point with cedar. Get those sanded down, and then you can put whatever finish you like on it. I like semi-gloss because I like that shine. A matte might look really cool too. You can definitely experiment and see what you like. And I hope this was helpful to you guys. I'll kind of pull out, here's a finished version of what we just put together that's sitting over here under all its clamps, which I'll pull this off so we can do kind of a side-by-side comparison of what that will look like when it's finished. And that is just such an amazing difference. That's my favorite part of the process, is that spray down where all those grains and colors just pop out, and it's so beautiful. So thank you for your time, and I hope you learned something, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about this project. So definitely message me if you came across this and you're not part of my Facebook group. It is Laser Love with Sebon Designs. Sebon Designs is my Etsy store. S-E-B-O-N is how that is spelled. And I hope to talk to you guys soon, and show me what you make. Post it in the Facebook group. We love to see all the beautiful things that everybody makes. Thanks so much, guys. Bye.